Welcome to Keep 'em Healthy with Jamie, your go-to classroom for integrative kids' health and wellness. I'm Jamie, a biology professor, an integrative health coach, and most importantly, a mom who's been through it all. When the conventional medical system couldn't provide the answers my own child needed, I took my background in anatomy, physiology, and nutrition and went looking for a better way. Join me as I chat with experts and physicians to help you decode your child's biology and psychology from childhood through young adulthood. If you're ready to stop guessing and start understanding, you're in the right place. Let's keep them healthy together. Okay, so in a world that is like obsessed with how fast AI can think, we've forgotten how to protect the one thing it can't replace, our human spark. So welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, we are diving into a conversation that is more urgent than ever, and especially after my last episode with Kirsten McGowan on tech and kids. We are living in a world that has a lot of digital noise and AI generated everything. And sometimes it can feel like we're losing our own spark in the process. So to help us find our way back, I'm excited to welcome back Kate Brenton from episode 88 on Lomi Lomi. Kate is a holistic educator and speaker who has spent 2 decades igniting creativity everywhere from Hawaiian classrooms to the East Coast boardrooms. She's on a mission to help us rekindle the human flame of purpose amidst the digital overload. Kate, I am so happy that you are here. Let's jump in.
Let's jump right in, Jamie. I love the space you hold. And when you were like the spark, I'm like, of course she would tie it all together in like the first sentence. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your attention to detail. I want you to know I notice it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that. You talk about rekindling the human flame. So how do we distinguish between AI as a tool and AI as something that might be dimming our natural creative spark?
I love this question, and I'm going to be transparent. So currently I am a mentor at Bramblewood Academy, which is a co-op. And in my personal space, I'm like not a fan of AI, which wouldn't be a big surprise. But in an educator space, you're not, as I was, trained to think. And I think that's a phrase we need to like hold on to, like to be trained to think, not what to think, but like trained on actually how to construct thought and critical analysis. Educators were supposed to hold a neutral space. So I'm like, okay, great. Like I have to work with high schoolers. And it's a project-based, this is going to be a long way, but this is how it all started to come together. So I'm going to teach writing and middle ages to high schoolers, and they're allowed to pick their project. And I am now having to focus on how technology-driven our world is because my son is much smaller. And because of being in holistic business, I could kind of like scapegoat away from it. And so the kids pick to code a video game. And I'm like, this is exactly the thing I don't know how to do, which is so what teenagers bring, right? They bring exactly what you want to avoid. And then I'm watching this coalescence of cannot be negative about AI. I can't hide my perspective, but I can't be negative because that's not really an education space. Shutting the door on something that's prevalent isn't being an educator. And so I was in a conversation where the kids had to draft an AI policy. And I was really like, the kids will laugh because I'm like, sometimes I'll like sit with my hand, like I will have to actually like physically restrain myself from like, don't give in, you know? And so I'm not going to say their names because they're under 18, but I was listening to 2 of the boys lead the conversation. And one of them said, well, you really can't source AI for a school project to do something that you don't know how to do. And I like perked up. And they're like, yeah, because that's actually like not fair because, you know, we're actually here to like learn and stuff. Now, I don't want to say they said that phrase actually here to learn, but I understood that the minds that were gathered between the ages of 14 and 17 had been taught that getting around something was not why they were at this academy. Learning that they didn't have to sit and do something for 12 hours of busy work, they were also taught. So somewhere in the middle, they were already understanding that AI was supposed to be a tool and not a generative product. And I thought, oh my God, of course, the generation that has to face this already has the answer. And so I think those kids who are technically still kids, but that's the beauty of teenagers, they're half children, half adult, right? They had already laid out that the way to leverage AI and not be a product of it is that you don't let it create the generative content for you, but you let it do the busy work.
So what makes me so happy is as an educator across from my entire life, you are also the student in the mix.
Yeah,
And so
totally.
you, Kate, were very much the student in this little group being when they told you how they're going to make this work and how it's going to benefit them and how it's not going to be a crutch for them for certain things. So during this process with them, what did you see would be your like a pro for the AI in the
Hmm.
process? And then conversely, like what would be the hidden cost that maybe we aren't talking enough about yet, or maybe you're starting to see as you watch them go through this?
Sure. So the pro would be because they literally are coding, and you have a group where not all of them are coders because the class wasn't a coding class. The class is history and writing, and so it wasn't expected. It wasn't an expected skill. Coding wasn't an expected skill, and it wouldn't have been fair to force people to become coders who didn't, because that's not the goal of the class. So what we had were a couple people that were really good at coding, and they said they could employ AI for repeatable code. And they actually had a philosophical conversation about not having AI generate the code, but have it repeat the code. And I
Okay.
thought, well, that's already something I don't understand. That is, do you know what I mean? Like we're in terrain that I don't understand. Now, the part where I was new to me was that where I would, probably because of my age, honestly, just use Google to answer a question. Sometimes they would say, let's just ask ChatGPT. And I would openly say, no, like you can't in a classroom ask. And I think what I noticed was the kids that were further along in age, and I think that's part of it, quite honestly. Because when you, like, okay, I taught English literature, and traditional freshmen, we'll say, not that labels always apply, but traditional freshmen were learning how to decode texts. And a lot of times they would look at text really literal, so you would give them easier on ramps and just be like, oh, here's a metaphor. But by the time I taught juniors, they were like, Holden Caulfield is a metaphor for the discontent, like there's something happened in those 2 years. And I saw that repeated in our class, because technically we have freshman and junior in the same class. And because it's so small, they can see the difference. And I'm starting to wonder if one of the uses of AI as answers needs to happen at a later neurological date.
Interesting.
And I don't think anybody wants to hear that.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have middle school kids, and the common phrase, Mom, everyone uses AI. Everyone uses it to answer their questions. However, I also just heard that the school district just banned the Google AI, like as the Google
Gemini?
answers
Mm-hmm.
off of their laptops, because
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is, in 3 seconds, you can have an answer from the computer, right? Of
Right.
whatever they're looking for.
Right.
So how do we, okay, we take that away, but then so we'll take that bot away, right? Or that chat GPT away. How do we teach them how to shift back to the process of thinking rather than just the result?
So one of the ways, once I understood that I was working with a population that agreed that it wasn't fair, it was against their moral code to not have it to have it degenerative. I started to just stack the writing prompts. So our writing prompt yesterday was, I don't know if you heard this, but people were asking AI for a destination in Australia, and they were buying tickets to go to this hot spring in Australia. There was no hot spring.
Oh my gosh.
So people were buying, it's like they're going to, and so I guess there were like coffee shops and stuff, and people were like, where is this thing? People bought tickets to
Wow.
go. And so their writing prompt, this is how I think you do it, actually. The writing prompt was they could be the AI, they could react to it, they could be the AI, or they could be the person that bought the ticket. And it was really funny that those that chose to respond in AI said something like, hey, I'm here in Australia. There's no hot spring. Oh, hey, great idea. Let me look that up for you. Hey, there's no hot spring. My bad. Would you like to? Like they already mimicked how, and we're saying how, well, AI always gives you a positive answer. Like it'll never say no. And I was watching their conversation, and then one kid said, well, who would even book a trip without checking? And I said, see, you guys are already better common thinkers than most people, because it's an article, and I've been showing them, like, look, this isn't just a Yahoo or a social media article. It hit Forbes, it hit this, so it hit at least 3 major papers, so it actually happened. And what are people doing that are not even looking up their trip? And that was our conversation. So I think stacking the deck with unfortunate examples of how it's not valuable, then it's not you, right? That's also, as you're a parent and an educator, you can sometimes, other children can hear you quicker than your own children can, right? Because the environment is different.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I think that third space, which tangentially AI is eroding, right? Why go to the library? Why ask another person? I can give you all the answers. But the problem with that is there's no third space. There's no bumping into another person. And as the kid, I've heard it in other places, like the kid said, it's always positive. So there's no discrepancy.
Absolutely. And the other side of it is now what's going to be taught to students, which I hope is sooner than later, is how to prompt AI to be non-biased and not to be so positive, because it'll direct you down this path. It just wants you to keep interacting with it. So it's going to tell you what you want to hear. So there's ways to prompt it that you can say, please give me a non-biased answer as to whatever the question is. And that is helpful. But I think source checking is a skill that even without AI that we need to do. I mean, even just what we hear on the news, what we see on the media, all these things,
100%.
you absolutely need to source check and to relate to, okay, well, what does my real life experience have? What does that have taught me? And then does that make sense? And, and then also what type of decisions am I making off of this information? And how am I using that in my life? And is that like making a huge trip to Australia, which is like, for us, it's a 24-hour like travel destination. It's not a drive down to the Jersey Shore, So those type of things, and really taking stock into, okay, what decision am I making? And so for our students, it's right now for them, it's a simple, like, can you tell me a science answer or a math answer? But you've developed this relationship of trust. And so you just immediately assume that it's going to be the right answer. So here's my next question. How can parents and educators, like, how can we teach them to be healthy skeptics without making them feel cynical or like that they can't trust anything? So what's your tip for that?
Well, I was thinking about this interview with you because you're wonderful how you hold space. And I thought, what is the through line? Like, what is the new through line? It's like data isn't wisdom. And that's what I keep saying to the kids.
I love that. Data is not wisdom.
It's not wisdom. You can get a fact, but the fact can change. You know what I mean? Like say, your dietary facts can change. At the age of your life, what you should be consuming. It's not that you were lied to, is that the body changes. So a fact, but that's wisdom, right? Wisdom is taking the data and threading it through. And so I'm becoming more passionate about this topic. I was talking about it at like an outdoor thing. There was a couple of moms, and a mom asked me, she's like, oh, that's so good. Like, what book would you have me read to help with critical thinking? And I think her question was valid. We were outside, it was freezing, kids were everywhere, and I thought, well, that's it. We all think there's one book, one podcast, one thing. But I said to her, books, like, what the data that's coming out is reading classics and reading, which I think is hilarious, because about 2 years ago, I thought the English major in me has no place in this world anymore. Like nobody, but the pendulum is swinging back. And parents that have children read long, sustained, and classics can be, it doesn't have to be like canonical texts that don't get changed and updated. You know what I mean? Like there can be other texts, but long, slightly difficult texts that take a child through a journey ends up being one of the shortest ways to make them more empathetic and critical thinkers, because it has that type of reading has predictive capability. It also has temporal capabilities to situate yourself. And unlike watching a video, the brain actually thinks it's submerged. And we're like, yeah, I know that. Like, but do we? Because a lot of our content consumption now is not hitting those neural pathways. They're not sustained. I remember when I taught high school in the 2000s, okay, so like that, aging myself, I was teaching then on the unreliability of corporations, and how in commercials with visual stimulation, your brain consumes the information and decides it later. Maybe doesn't even decide it, depending on how much it's consuming. But with reading, the pace is slowed, so you're deciding and predicting as you're consuming.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I also think in these books and the stories that were created, even the classicals, nothing is like, AI is new, quote unquote, but in every generation, there's new things and there's new discoveries and there's new integration of how does this fit into our culture of life, and how are we going to make the next generation still be empathetic and all these things. So I don't think that anything that we are going through as parents and as educators is actually super new, in the sense that all these obstacles may look a little different, but it's still the same obstacle of how do we integrate? How do we use this so that it's a tool, so that it's something that helps them, so that they can still be good humans and be in the world, right? And so I think using that too. So you use it for obviously to slow the information so you can consume it and have an interaction emotionally with it and have a beginning, middle, end versus like, any type of information that is from media is like quick hits. And so you may not have a connection with it because it's a quick hit. But all these things considered, at the end of the day, I think we want to focus on AI and say, okay, here we have this tool, but how do I use it that I can make these humans still have good information, live a strong, happy life, but have empathy and intuition in this world, right? So my next question for you is to be like, okay, so if we use AI for this like logic, you're saying it can repeat things for them, it can take away some busy work. So if we take that space that we used to spend on busy work, and this is even an example, my kids just watched Hidden Figures. These were the mathematicians that would sit down and do the calculations for NASA. Then a calculator came into the world, and then the computer, right? So now all of a sudden, the women who would take 24 hours to 48 hours to solve this math equation now can be solved in a couple of seconds. Same thing's happening here with AI. Great. So this space now that we've created, what are we doing with it?
Well, one, I do not think AI is like anything we've ever done before, because I think it reacts in real time without resistance. And everything else we've worked with has had a space of error, and like the tension or human effort was more visible. And I don't think we really understand what not having resistance is doing. The other thing that I want to throw in here is I was listening to a podcast with Brene Brown, and she said something that really hit. And she said, I'm in really interesting spaces because I see forward-facing tech bros, that was her language, telling kids to learn coding and physics, and this is the future. And she said, and then in the next conversation, when asked what made them successful, was spending a life reading philosophy and the creative arts, and they're putting their children in Montessori, Waldorf, and schools that have no technology. So I think we have to also look at what's being told in consumer and what's being done behind closed doors. Because when I'm watching, it would be lovely for my mind to be correct. But one of the linchpins of why I think the liberal arts and bringing hard back is that the children I'm teaching, they're not in private school, but they are in families that deeply revere education. So the older students were citing wars and philosophers that I hadn't taught yet. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a different story. I don't have to on-ramp everything. I think the children that have been pulled out into the forest, forest schools has become a really big thing, or give your child power tools, or let them run outside and have passion projects. The way that you intuitively as a parent let your kid have the freedom to fall without, the freedom to like get scraped but not break a bone, right? The freedom to understand, someone said to me like about my son's water bottle. I'm like, well, yeah, I want him drinking out of stainless steel, but he's lost 3 of them in 3 months. So now we're on the plastic Gatorades until he says to me like, hey, where do my water bottles keep going? I'm like, that is a great question. Where are your water? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
He had the experience of trying to leave for practice and he had no water bottle because I stopped supplying a preemptive need. And it became hard. He wasn't dehydrated, right? But it was difficult. And when it became not easy, he looked down and at 8, he was like, oh, I have no water bottles. And I was like, yeah, bro, you have no water bottles. Like, how can we fix that? I don't think AI creates the space for you to realize what you're missing.
Okay.
And that's where learning happens. Like, we don't want anything to be unnecessarily hard. But when you understand that you can't, like for example, Miyazaki, the Japanese anime artist, they're not hiring any artists that can't draw in their interview, right? Porsche and another company did AI hand-drawn art. And so one of the things Brene Brown was saying, I was telling my kid, then this is how I think you can use AI. Same way. I was telling them, I'm going to reference Brene Brown. It's not that I need her to prove my point, but I was surprised at what she said. It mirrored my point. She has more cultural currency than I do. So if I quote her with my point, people will listen. That's how I taught them public speaking, right?
Right.
I think there's something there with, they're telling you this is the only way, but then just off the periphery of those that have infinite resources to make choices are highlighting that they are using that human spark as a differential of resource. So I think what you're like, well, what do I do with my 7-year-olds that likes trucks? Let them play with trucks. Let them create trucks. let them form with their hands. And so that the current between head, heart, and hands, which is the line of Waldorf, right? Like bring head, heart, and hands. Rudolf Steiner said that. Let that be the preeminent focus for as long as possible. Because then the only thing that's going to pull them off of AI is that they're living a life that's better than AI.
Right. But if I can go back to the one thing where you said that there's no resistance from AI, if we go back to the story though, about the people who went to Australia,
Yes.
like there is some learning curve, like there is some things that you're saying you went, you trusted this thing, you thought it was going to be the greatest thing that's ever you've ever experienced in life. Like that storyline to me has only been recreated from years and years of thinking of the train's going to be the best thing. And it did, but it brought other things. The Industrial Revolution brought a lot of great things, but it also brought a lot of other things,
Right.
like I do feel like in these new phases, we do see that there's going to be some positive and some negative. And I love the pendulum swinging situation where what happens is, especially even just not even AI, with technology in general, where we're like, this is so great. The kids can talk to each other at any time and all this stuff. And we like give. And all of a sudden we're like, whoa, that's not good. All of a sudden we see all these like mental health. So now the pendulum is starting to swing, the conversation starting to pull that like back to being a reasonable, what's age appropriate? What are, the same thing about what you're saying, even with AI. I think age appropriately, you should wait till you're about 15, 16 to start prompting it versus prompting it at age 10, and I think those are the things, those are the gold nuggets that as we experience and use these things that we bring to the next generation, so that we keep living and experiencing it and learning and then teaching, which is, I know that's what you love to do. And that's what I love to do. This is why we're here, girl. Right. And so I do think that, but for the parents, I would say that maybe have the 10-year-old that's asking, all my friends use AI. Well, what would be like a holistic habit that could be something to help them to focus on being a critical thinker, or like to redirect? We know with kids, it's like, let's redirect. How can we redirect them to feel confident that they're going to learn these answers or learn a skill and not be like, I need to go to AI every time?
It's a great question. So I'm thinking of when somebody submitted their work to AI to check for grammar, and the AI told them that it wasn't their own content, but it was. And so we got into a conversation, and she's like, it keeps telling me it's like 80% plagiarized, but I did it. And I know this, like, it was a creative prompt. So there wasn't a grade. So there was like no reason for her to be plagiarizing. And so she was really confused. And I said to her, I'm like, I think it's just a good reminder that it just isn't more intelligent than you. Like, I think because it's so fancy and we're being told that it's faster and better than the human brain. And I just ideologically don't agree with that, because I don't want to get away from your question, but ideologically, I think nature has a multiplicity, and I think technology is a singularity. Like we can all go outside, be in totally different emotional states, and all be nourished by nature. That's a multiplicity. And to your point, then in my brain, if I had a 10-year-old who was asking to use ChatGPT, I might ask them to talk to get ChatGPT's answer, sort of stack the deck on something they're really well versed at, and watch what ChatGPT says. I think, I might be wrong, maybe by next year I'll be wrong, that they'll see the nuances that the computer missed. And so then you have a choice of saying, well, if you ask a better question, it'll give you more information. But I think you also have to confirm for the child that they're still learning, and a computer has a lot of data, but that they still are infinitely more diverse than the computer. And I don't hear a lot of people telling kids that. Kids will really quickly adjust to what you think of them. And so if you tell them that the way to it is to ask AI better questions only, then you're actually fitting the child into the machine.
I understand what you're saying there. Instead of setting the mindset of your brain is the most wonderful, powerful part of your body. Like you need to nourish that. You need to work on this. Like this is going to be your golden ticket for your future, not AI. So we need to nourish it. We need to build. We need to have it critically thinking. We need to be enjoying passion, going outside, taking in all the different things that are going to build your experience in this world versus just assuming AI has that better data.
Yeah, because what they're also saying is that people are feeling more pressured on time, and that they did a study on the brain, which I saved the link. So if you need it, that real experiences slow down time. So that's sort of a red flag that, if you have something that's like, I can give you all the answers, it's yes, but data is not wisdom. And one day you will not be here for your child, right? So you
Right.
need to start young, I think, especially for my parenting tactic, which means it's completely foul, like could be totally flawed. I'm just a
Right.
person.
But that's the beauty of it. You are a human experiencing life, same as everybody else. Yeah.
Right. So like my thing is to start saying a lot of times. Like one time my son was somewhere where there was Alexa. I don't have Alexa. I don't need her. And so we've talked about that, and he luckily, gracefully, he asked it at somebody else's house, and it gave an answer that he knew was wrong. And I just jumped on it. I said, the computer does not know more than you. A computer will never know more than you. Now, do I think that's going to be how he's going to respond to me at 13, 14? No. Do I think I'm planting subconscious seeds that will sprout someday? Yes, I'm very aware of what I'm doing, right? Like I'm very aware that I want that somewhere in the back of his head. And so in 1,000 ways, another example, we were out driving and I really wish I remembered what it was, but I don't know if it was like a something he could not have consumed. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a beverage or anything like that. And he was like, oh, that's the best. And I said, well, who told you that was the best? He said, I saw a commercial. And I said to him, who wrote the commercial? And he was like, oh. So already, like to me, it's not that it's wrong. Now, if he had told me my best friend's dad owns that, I would have been like, oh my God, then it's totally the best. But if his only source was something outside of himself, I didn't say it wasn't the best. I just asked him, where did it come from?
Right.
And I think asking those questions of where did it come from is going to be really not to be cynical. You know, you should be asking that anyway. You should be really, that's of liberal arts education, right? Which I'm, again, so excited that that is becoming an antidote. Like there is a woman, if she would do a podcast with you, I think it would be fantastic. She's doing a Harvard thesis on critical thinkers will be the difference. They will be the ones. Brene Brown's phrase was, those who know how to maintain sovereignty between their ears will be the ones that can create their own life. And if you have someone saying that now and you're thinking like, oh, but you're telling me all my friends are using it. And it's like, well, just think about that. A prominent best-selling author is going around saying that the children, and that's what she said. She goes, when she heard the tech bros say about, you know, what they're actually doing with their children, she said her team said, you know, what can I do with, like, how can we get this training out? She's like, my first thought wasn't training the public. She's like, I will. My first thought was my children. Like, we need to be having dinner conversations. So I don't think adding to any parent's plate right now is an answer. So that is not my answer at all. Going to a library is something tactile you might want to do. Like they might not be excited. You can like cheat by going to Barnes and Noble because they have toy section. Get your kids around tactile information because it feels different. Teach them, buy them a cookie while they're there. Start stacking the deck on seeking out tactile experiences. And in the things they already love to do, put in the effort of offering another avenue of information. And so you're not the one telling them that it's not enough. They're knowing that spending the time with you and having the adventure experience, even, and again, you know, sometimes I can plan really fun things for my son and getting him there is not the most fun. Like transitions at certain ages are not fun. So I'm not saying that this isn't arduous. But I think that's going to be the differential because some of those core memories of activities and engaging conversations, maybe letting them on AI, but then having a conversation with you and not to knock them over, but just ask like, well, how does it know that? Was that your experience too? I said that. Cool. Should we like get a book on that? Like, is there a TV show? Is that what Bryce Harper said? Like I use baseball and construction all the time, you know, because those are things that my son has spent time with. And I do the same things with the kids that I'm teaching, or I'll ask them, I'll say, you know, they have the high school students that I'm teaching undeniably have a much better understanding of ChatGPT and OpenAI than I do. So I don't pretend to know more than them. And I will say to them, I'm probably biased. You know, teenagers love honesty. But can you tell me, is that reliable? And they'll be like, well, yeah, you got to ask it like this, or, oh yeah, you have to do it like that. I'm like, okay, they can still see the difference. And I think that's why I keep leaning on that language of like critical thinking and liberal arts, because it's the art of thinking that's going to be the difference. And those inroads don't happen through the tool that you're looking to be better than. They happen away from the tool. I don't see the data saying anything else. I don't see AI being the road to the critical thinker. I see lived experience and cultivation of effort.
Yeah. I think pulling away from everything you're saying is, I have a couple things first, but the one thing to pull off what you just said is when we talked about how using AI as a tool for like that busy work so that they can create more time and space for their critical thinking as an intention, and saying, okay, I know I don't want it to give me my answers. I'm going to discover that on my own when I build whatever I'm building. However, I have these math, or I have these codes that need to repeat, or whatever it is the AI can do that for me while I can go and discover. And then that could push that critical thinker beyond, because again, you're creating more space for that
That's right.
critical thinking. And it's same thing goes for the emotional intelligence or whatever. But the other side of it is too, and I tell this to my kids all the time, and this goes back to the beginning of what you're saying about when your son was saying that this was the best. And you're like, well, how do we know that? Right. And in my house, the rule is my children, and maybe this is a little harsh, but I'm like, you're not allowed to have an opinion of something that you've never experienced.
Love it.
And so the situation was a school play. And I
Mhm.
said, I would love for everyone to try a school play. And they're like, no, Mom, it's like, I'm uncomfortable. I can't do that. And I said, hold up. I said, have you ever done a school play? Well, no. I'm like, okay. So how could you ever know if you've never experienced it?
That's right.
I said, until you experience it, then you can tell me your opinion. But up until that point, you don't have one because you've never experienced it. So
That's
even
right.
those prompts of being like, or they don't want to go to that playground because that playground's stupid. I'm like, hey, have you ever gone? Well, no. Well, then how would you? I just heard. Well, what from who? Like,
That's right.
and then here's the caveat of that is that my children did do a school play and it was one of the best experiences of their life. Now, maybe they didn't feel that way 5 years later because they're in different things, but in that moment, they loved it. And so
Mhm.
I always bring that example back because, again, as a parenting experience, I'm like, okay, remember when you told me you hated school plays and you did it and you had a great time? See, this is the same thing, different color, right? Like you need to go and experience this before you can come and tell me how lame it is. And then you can, if you have, and then I'll respect your opinion because you have a lived experience, right? And then the one thing you said about how the critical thinkers, the people that what is between their ears is sovereign, that is something language wise for our kids. We can start now, like day one of just telling them how important it is to protect their brain, nourish their brain and their thoughts and their life and their experiences, and how that will always be their guiding tool, their primary guiding tool. And to trust that intuition, because that intuition is going to guide you on the path that is meant for you. AI can never know that. They can't.
Exactly. No, it can't.
They can never know that. And so that is something that is super important. I do think you're going to see that people in this next generation that are going to succeed are the ones that know how to stand in their truth,
That's
that
right.
know their truth, and that know their value, and that their intuition and their mind is one of the greatest gifts and a 10 times better AI that you could ever have. And that's something that we can say, AI is cool. That's interesting how you learned that. But I want to hear what I want to hear what your life is telling me, and like start that so young, So I do appreciate what you said and all those things, Kate.
I think it's just the truth. The fact that we agreed on this interview, here is a non-AI example, but what the magic of life can do. We agreed to this interview. And in that time, not because of the interview, but just because of what we had to cover in the content, you're reminding me that I saw a TED Talk, it was a short one, where a younger person did a visual of how many hours somebody at 18 would spend on AI, would spend on social media, and how little lived experience all this, whatever. But because it was a younger person, I gave it. Our school uses a Socratic method where you give content, and the kids are supposed. It's not about getting an answer. It's about the questions around the content. The kids watched it, and one of the students wrote, "I didn't realize social media was basically me selling a subscription of myself to a company." And I was like,
Yeek.
And then he wrote, he's like, funny thing, because I have a job, and so now and it like clicked for him, and I was like, this is liberal arts training. You don't tell them what to think. You put something there and watch. They're always going to give you something back better. Like you said, you're a student. Real teachers know you bring the best intention and content, and the students will always bring you something you never saw. That's literally how humans work, And then another child said, this guy made me feel scared, but he didn't give me any hope. You need to give me something to do. And I thought, okay, that's for me directly, because I can say, oh, this is wrong, but not give a positive solution. I don't think he intended it for me. I took it and put it in my back pocket. And then one of the kids wrote, I guess that's why one of my favorite things to do with my family is play cards at night. I always sleep better. And I thought, it's not that hard. If a child unattended wrote that playing cards with his family at night makes him feel better. The answers against technology are just not that hard.
No, and it's just that awareness of
Mm-hmm.
knowing how to balance that. And again, use it as a tool, but not as the end all be all that it's going to be your life. And understanding the connections like these students are having that you couldn't even, if you would have put that on a PowerPoint slide about that it's taking, your subscription of yourself or whatever, they'd be like, what? But the fact that he created that thought, or she,
That's
I'm
right.
not sure, but whoever was created that thought will resonate with them and stick with them. And they'll be like, wow, look at that connection. And then they'll continue to make those connections, which is very cool and very powerful. And I love these examples. So thank you for sharing them. And so what is the good news about what we were talking about? What is something you would like to share with parents talking about? Remember how you're saying, well, there's no hope. So here we go. This is your training. You just said you have to work on like making sure like you're going to say, because we haven't been super negative about all this. We're just trying to process and see, using our data of our experiences with our students, our kids, whatever the case may be, how we can filter everything and make it so that it is a tool and that the students and the children are still living their best life and honoring their body and their systems and their mind the way that they're supposed to. So what is the good news?
The good news is trust the kids.
Yeah.
Use your discernment, because these children have been raised with discernment, right? Somebody is protecting some gates. No one is saying, go do whatever you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can see it in their demeanor. But the good news is if you trust the children and put them in the space to discover it, they will. Like I've told them continuous, I'm like, you guys have re-inspired hope in education for me, because it all still comes back to like what you started. It's their spark. Somebody is protecting these kids' spark. And by that light not going out, not being turned to LED, but being that flame of human creativity staying there, they have discernment. So instead of trying to figure out how to teach discernment, you just protect their flame. You let the wind is going to come, just don't let it blow out, let it get stronger, let it billow a little bit. But that's really the good news, is that if you double down on human creativity, the kids are going to be fine.
I love that. Thank you so much. Well, listeners, I really hope that you absorb some really good information and you're having some critical thinking moments off of this information, just to how does this relate to you? How does this relate to maybe the students you're teaching or the kids that you have? And, not only that, but protecting your own flame and remembering how powerful your brain is and your soul is, and that everything we need is out in nature and in relationship with others, and to take the moments and take the time to appreciate that and to remember that we have choices to make every day. And so, use the tools you have and remember how much you should be honoring yourself. So Kate, thank you so much for coming on the show. Listeners, thank you for being here with us. And I hope everyone has a fabulous day. Listeners, thanks for hanging out with me in the classroom today. If today's episode sparked a new idea for you, please make sure to click follow on your podcast app so you never miss a conversation. If you know a parent who is currently struggling to find answers, please share this episode with them. You just might be that link to help them on their journey. And finally, if you're a wellness expert or mom with a story to share, email me. I'd love to have you on the show. Until next time, keep them healthy.